Hello, welcome to the Essential Libertarians, giving you the tools for self-governance while we still can. Today, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Daniel Vitro. Dan, how are you doing?
I'm great. Some big news that I think you probably looked over a little bit that I want to cover, but big news right now. Rittenhouse loves BLM. Soros left Austria. We don't know what the hell's going on. Big news to cover. That's what I gotta say.
Yeah, I think somebody would frame it like that. So, I definitely got some really interesting stuff to talk about. But for everybody who's out there who's going to celebrate Thanksgiving, I think you're going to really like this. I find it really telling that now and I'll even show people how subtle this is because they're not really coming out and saying it, but I think we're gonna figure out some new revelations on how they're taking the collapse of the dollar in a very interesting way. So should be a good one. But before we get started, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to keep the Ron Paul movement going, if you want to keep the ideals of Murray Rothbard alive, if you want to live in an actually free society, an actually free world, it is possible. Go ahead and go to the lpmisescaucus.com. Our message is simple. No more wars, no more lockdowns, no more bailouts, no more mandates. You're an individual. You can make the best choices for yourself. Enter your name, last name, email, address, phone number, and state, and be part of the revolution. You can find our resources here. So before we get onto the really big news, I know a lot of people are going to celebrate Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving. I saw Luke Rudkowski's thing on the Today Show, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. I know this seems harmless, okay, Thanksgiving, how to save. Most people wouldn't really look into this anything more than helpful tips. And I did query how to save. I find this interesting. Save electricity on Thanksgiving. Pro tips to save money, how to have happy meals. A lot of people are doing this they could be cheaper. This could be this. Take these steps to save. And some of this might not be malicious, but on the Today Show, they said, hey, Thanksgiving costs are up. Here's some tips on how to save, how to either not have a turkey, find a free turkey. I saw the Federal Reserve even said if you can't get a turkey, get soybeans. So saving electricity these Thanksgiving, these tips, a lot of this doesn't look bad. This doesn't look malicious. And maybe it's not. But I find it interesting that with everything happening, with the cost of energy going up, with the dollar losing its value more and more through inflation, this is kind of how they're guiding the media, much like they were saying that marijuana caused heart problems. So am I overblowing this?
And they said that for a long time, decades actually. It was it's basically a study that was a sort of legitimate study in the sense there was an actual study that took place, but the study was purposefully manipulated to get to a certain result, and even the result was sort of bogus. Because if you pick a portion of people out of the population and a portion of those people have a heart disease, and then you have them take cannabis and you say, okay, well, their heart disease got worse or it worsened their condition. It was completely manipulated to sort of go along the lines, continue with the narrative of the war on drugs and keep marijuana as an illegal substance. And to keep anything illegal, you need, guess what? Justification. How do you justify it? Well, he completely basically made up false studies that say they prove heart disease, but never did. And it's crazy thinking about that because anyone who smoked marijuana would be like, heart disease? I mean, if you eat more food because you get the munchies, then yes. But that's not because of marijuana. That's because you're eating more food. It's not, marijuana is not doing it. It's the eating of food that's doing it, which marijuana is necessarily making you eat food, but it's not a direct symptom of the drug itself. So,
yeah. Anyway. Correlation does not imply causation. I just find it funny how they're trying to be real subtle about bad things that are going on, in my opinion. Inflation's going up. They're not going to say, oh, the collapse of the dollar because people say, here's how to save money on higher food costs. Oh, energy's going up. Don't worry. Here's how to save on electricity and gas. So they're going to play it off like, we're destroying your currency, but no big deal. No big deal. Here's how you can do without. See, to me, they're not, even if they say like you'll own nothing, you'll be happy, they're not going to come out and do it like that. Like, oh, we're taking it, because that wouldn't be subtle. But if you play the media, you play the articles, you play this stuff, then people are like, well, maybe it's not so bad, that here's some articles on tips on how to do without, and we'll just keep doing without, and you fall into that trap. That's my opinion. But anyway, we have Fincen is asking banks to watch for transactions linked to environmental crimes. I don't even know what the heck. I tried to read this and make sense of this. I don't know who signs this or who comes up with this stuff. Like, it's not even fun. It's not like memes that are funny. I'm like, oh, that took some thought. Like, who comes up with this? But the world of illegal logging might seem far removed from well-lit offices of the U.S. main financial hubs. The government is hoping bankers can play a part in stopping such crimes. I mean, logging used to be on the History Channel as a thing, so I don't know. The U.S. Treasury Department's anti-money laundering watchdog on Thursday issued its first advisory on environmental crimes, asking banks and other financial institutions to pay special attention to transactions that may be linked to that activity, the agency says. Contributes to climate change and the loss of biodiversity. Go ahead.
I was going to say, okay, so one thing that's very interesting about this article is that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it. There's a lot of articles like this that have been coming out for the last year, which are like maybe one of the craziest articles. I believe it was from the Times. Yeah, I believe it was the Times that said lockdowns for climate change may be a thing, right? And they may work. And there's been other articles like using studies under COVID to say, okay, because there was COVID lockdowns, the environment was X amount of ways better, and a certain number of carbon was emitted versus other years when there were no lockdowns. And they said our carbon levels were so low under the COVID lockdowns. It was amazing. The climate was prospering. We weren't damaging it. So then that's going to be the justification as to when we do another lockdown. Not saying that that's necessarily going to happen. But the reason why this article is so big is because in a government, right, pretty much a very secretive part of the government, which is known as the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which is connected to the Treasury Department, but it's its own entity that does its own thing. It's like if the Treasury Department had an FBI, this would be their FBI. And they do a lot of spying. They work with the NSA to also get into people's accounts through PRISM and other programs to gather data and basically surveil different financial data from just basic Americans. And they also work with the IRS. In fact, this entities largely do, on large part do, giving the IRS a lot of their information when it comes to people not paying taxes or getting over tax loopholes. So they are definitely the financial intelligence agency, and most people don't even know what they are, which also blows my mind. And they're very malevolent. Not everyone, but the entity itself. It's like, okay, we're going to implement this we're going to implement this policy that is completely unjust and was supposed to be temporary almost 100 years ago now, maybe 100 years ago now. And then after we keep that policy that was supposed to be temporary, we're going to implement new portions of that policy. So not only are we going to have income taxes, we're going to have capital gains taxes, we're going to have unrealized capital gains taxes, we're going to have excess amount of property taxes, we're going to have stock taxes, we're going to have crypto taxes, we're going to have taxes for carbon, which will be a thing. I'm almost positive about that. And then because we've created all these unjust policies, we now need an agency which can seek out those who don't follow these unjust policies and then arrest them under an unjust pretext in the first place. It's craziness. It's ludicrous. And it's quite frankly disgusting.
Yeah. And in my opinion, this is what happens when you have unregulated agencies. And that's the danger. Because a lot of people are focused, especially when it comes to federal government, put this guy in, put that guy in, get rid of Biden, put this person in, put DeSantis in, then DeSantis doesn't work out, I bet, then put this Democrat in, put this, then he doesn't work out, then play red versus blue aggressively. And I'm like, I don't even give people the thing, even if you got Rand Paul and Thomas Massie, which to me are the two best people in the federal government, if there is any good people in the federal government left, they're unregulated agencies that are going to do whatever they want, like this, like Fincen, like the ATF, like the CIA, like the FBI, like the whole intelligence agency. They don't care. Their goals are one thing and one thing only, in my opinion, to do the bidding of the special interests that want to get something done. They don't really care about the Constitution. They don't really care about helping social or economic welfare. They just care about their special interests. And this clearly, to me, looks like that. And it's scary to see that the Treasury Department now is becoming like a quasi-military force. Like, wouldn't be surprised if, hey, they actually do. So, yeah, thank you for bringing this article definitely to my attention. So, I know I've been talking a lot about Austria, but I think it's something important to take a look at because as I say again, I'll say a lot of people say it can't happen here, can't happen here. I don't see anything magical, if I'm being fair. I'm not saying, America's not an amazing place to live, but I don't see anything magical where tyranny can't come here. It's not like there's an ad blocker on tyranny. It definitely and can very well happen here. The big reason it happens here is because everybody's convinced it can't. Just like when I was younger, I'm like, oh, well, I'll never have something bad happen to me. I'll never, bump my car. I'll never get caught drinking in the wrong place. I'll never be in X situation. It happens, and you realize, maybe I should take a step back and reevaluate. So what's going on? I've talked about Austria for a while. But let's just get simple. They basically said you follow in line, you do what we want, we'll give you a free pass. You'll be free then. And I keep telling people that's how prison works. You jump through more hoops, they keep creating more hoops, and then it becomes eventually just impossible to jump through them. Even people who support it are like, I can't do this anymore. So they locked down everybody and they said, you have to take this procedure. It doesn't matter what you are, what you do, who you are, you have to take it. But I said, hey, look, people got to rise up, do something. So it's nice to see some 40,000 people doing it. I don't know if that's enough, but Schallenberg says the mandate is due to enter force on February 1st. So they still have some time to turn this around. That's what I didn't know. And it's needed to boost a stagnation when it comes to this medical procedure. Just over 69% of eligible people. You were asking that, Daniel, or someone asked.
Yeah, I did. I still want to know.
Yeah. So 69% of eligible people have received at least one dose of this medical procedure. Now I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know how they count these things. Like, I don't know how they're keeping these statistics, but assuming that's correct, languishing about 10 percentage points behind other wealthy European countries. Authorities blame the comparatively low
60. Okay. Here's the data I'm getting, and don't worry, this is from the New York Times and the CDC as well, so it's completely accurate. So this is 2 days ago, as of 2 days ago. Austria, where 66% of the population is fully vaccinated, reported more than 14,000 new cases of the virus within 24 hours on Sunday. Over the past week, the Netherlands has been averaging more than 20,000, while Germany has seen roughly double that number. So we're seeing 66% is like, it's like no small number. I mean, that's like half the population who's gotten both shots. But again, when you are talking about fully vaccinated, you're simply saying what they deem to be fully vaccinated now, because you have to understand, and this is all public information, feel free to look it up, Moderna and Pfizer drop in efficacy rates from 6 months after you get your second shot, they drop below 60% in efficacy rates. That means and then after 7 months, around 40, after 8, 30, and then by 8 or 9 or 10 months, you're close to basically not even being vaccinated at all. So you're talking about 6 months, not even. You're talking about a few months of very high efficacy rates, and then you're going to have to get another booster. Well, then you're just going to have to keep getting boosters, right? Unless they improve the vaccine.
Yeah, you're on a subscription, basically.
Yeah, but let me ask you, and this is for the audience and you, Kareem, since when did agencies, or even better, corporations funded by agencies in the federal government, when did they want to make it easy? When did they want to make it more affordable for the consumer in a product? So far as I see it, they've always wanted to find a way to keep a program, a medication in your life to where you keep needing to purchase it, right? And you say, well, you're not buying the vaccine. No, you're not buying it. But as long as people keep getting boosters, big pharma and different pharmaceutical companies keep making money. But if the boosters end, so does a lot of their money, because although you're not paying for it, someone is. It's being bought and paid for by in multiple different ways. So wouldn't it be in their interest, just from a profit motive, to have the booster, even if they didn't need it, even if there was a way, right? Yeah. We're seeing all these treatments, and we're seeing all these things. The Israeli study that showed, I believe, 10 to 12 times better, 10 to 12 times better protection against the virus from natural immunity. And then you factor that in with vaccine, you're really good. But even if there was, and there is all these other treatments, it seems as though they're keeping this procedure and this inoculation on because they want to keep making money, and they want to keep it in your life. So then you keep having to get it, and they keep earning their profit.
Yeah. To me, that's the most efficient thing. That's what they're going to want to do for two reasons. Why cure it if you can keep making a profit? Big Pharma loses. And Big Pharma, to me, is nothing more than a government program, an extension of them. They just have a private logo. It's corporatism. And I agree with Milton Friedman's quote, there's nothing so permanent as a temporary government program. So that's why I tell people it's not just going to go away. They're going to want to keep making money. They're going to want to keep pushing this. So I don't even know what the goalposts are, because they change the goalposts all the time. I can't even keep up. It changes more than the price of Bitcoin. It's, but no, I got it, but no, there's 2 weeks, and then this, and then you need a third, and you need a fourth, and a fifth, and this, and that. Oh, but on the sixth one, we'll give you this. It's too much. So I'm telling people, 40,000 is a good start. That's okay. But Austria is millions of people. What I would say is this is a good start, but it needs to get much, much bigger. France, I know for a fact, has more than 40,000 people, and they're not gone this far yet. They have that green pass stuff. November, December, January, February, they got a few months. They need to get it. In my opinion, people need to get it together in Austria and just beat this thing. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they need to figure out a way to get more than 40,000 people. We need like a couple million, at least in my opinion. And I'm not saying numbers are everything. I agree with Michael Malice. Like, okay, there's always going to be people who want to sit on the sidelines and stuff. There's always going to be people who are going to want to like hang out, not do anything. And I get that. I think Austria has almost 9 million people. It would be nice to see at least 2 million people that I could say, wow, this is big. Like, are they going to arrest 2 million people? So that's my opinion on this. Let's talk about what's going on in Vietnam. All right, so 500 Vietnamese forced laborers at the Chinese factory in Serbia have only 2 toilets, the report alleges. I saw this. It was interesting because a lot of people always especially people on the neoliberal left are like, we want to be like China.
I know that's exactly why I sent you this article, because one of the YouTubers I watch, and I honestly recommend him. He's a big Leninist, Marxist, socialist type. His name is Jackson Hinkle. He's not that big, but he's pretty big. You know, he's talked to Jimmy Dore and whatnot on the left. He's pretty big in the left. And he's debated Vosh, and why I like him is because he's not a neoliberal. But one thing that he does tend to do is when critiquing people's critique of socialism, he always tends to bring up China as the sort of model to how socialism is successful. It's like, okay, if you want to use some information and some data, and you want to use that to propagate a certain thesis or hypothesis, that's fine, but you can't just extrapolate and leave out the rest of the stuff that they're doing. It's like, okay, yes, they pretty much knocked out child poverty. Yes, they increased the wages, but a large portion of their manufacturing is done by people who work for less than $2 an hour and who die from starvation, and their workers have, I'm not going to say this because I don't know the statistic is, I know they fall in the top 10 category of having workers to which commit the most suicide, especially in the manufacturing side of things. They're
the safety nets and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, China's no model for, in my opinion, really anything that I can think of. They treat the Uyghurs bad, Tibet. They are not really good with Taiwan either. And I think the worst thing is that a lot of people, I don't know if this guy's neoliberal or Leninist or Marxist, a lot of people overlook all the bad stuff and just say the good things. And I think if you're going to critique a system, I tell people libertarianism won't be Disneyland, but it'll be slightly better. And that's kind of my thing that I push is like, okay, fine, our anarcho-capitalism is not going to be Disneyland. Don't trust me.
Well, I mean, okay.
But the chances that something like what's going on in Austria or this exploitation at this level will happen, I doubt it. And just for the record, even being, on in the libertarian right myself, being an advocate of free market anarchy, I still really like Jimmy Dore. Actually,
I more than like him. I respect the hell out of Jimmy Dore. Why do I respect the hell out of Jimmy Dore? Well, I respect him because he critiques the left more than even people on the right. Yeah. And I respect people on the right and people on the left. Anyone who is more than willing to critique their own tribe and do so in a very, very thorough format to critique the left and call out what everyone is doing for all their bullshit, whether it be his friends like Kyle Kalinske. He's called him out numerous times. He's called out everyone, and that's why Jimmy Dore's been considered by Cenk Uygur and a lot of other leftists. These would be the neoliberals, obviously, like open basic neoliberals who supported the war in Afghanistan, who supported the war in Iraq, who supported the wars in Syria, all this stuff, total neoliberals. There's a reason why they hate Jimmy Dore, because he's not a neoliberal, and they're neoliberals. Therefore, their ideologies clash. One wants intervention, and one wants basically the least amount of intervention possible, meaning like we have to defend ourselves against foreign enemies and domestic enemies, but that's even been being exacerbated under the Biden administration. But it's like, yes, we have to have a country, which requires security. But there's a difference between security and, I don't necessarily like the word imperialism, but trying to spread our beliefs to every country and killing their people in the process. That's a no-no, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, it's just, well, for one, it's wrong against the non-aggression principle, natural law. We see consequences of it. I mean, definitely like people with PTSD and suicide rates. Shout out to the Libertarian Veteran Caucus, for helping solve this, and Adam Kokesh for addressing problems like these. But yeah, we don't have the right. Even if Jeffersonian democracies is the best system, let's get it working here. Let's get it working better, here. That would even be my challenge. If you think Jeffersonian democracies and classical liberalism works awesome, which it does seem to work good in the early stages, get it working here. Decrease the government here. But don't tell other people how to live. I don't really honestly, not that I condone people doing bad things, but I don't, the rest of the world can figure out what's best for them. Doesn't mean I won't criticize it. Doesn't mean Saudi Arabia is doing some crazy Wahhabi stuff. I'm not going to be like, yeah, that's completely immoral. But I don't think we should military interventionism. And I kind of like, if I'm being honest, I kind of like Vosh on that sometimes. I just don't like him pushing the medical stuff. I'm curious to know your guy, not your guy, but the guy you mentioned on this, who says China's a good model for everything. What his opinion, if he's posted it, which I'm guessing he has, on this whole medical stuff is.
Well, so he's anti-vaccine mandate. He gets criticized from this on the left, right? He doesn't, and by the way, I want to clarify, Jackson doesn't say it's necessarily the model, but a lot of times he tends to say, he tends to pull out statistics from China, which are used to sort of make an argument for socialism and how it can be done right, which he's maybe right in those statistics. Yes, as I said, they did cut child poverty in half. And they did so very quickly. They did build massive infrastructure in a very short amount of time. And they did that because the fact that they are a authoritarian state and they can cut all of the processes to which we have to endure, the bureaucracy, the opposite of what a true constitutional republic is, with decentralized institutions and what the opposite, right? But if you're going to do that, if you're going to pull up all that data and pull out those statistics, that's fine. But you have to pull out the others. Right, you have to pull out the data and the statistics that a large portion of their population, a large portion of their labor market are forced laborers. Like, you have to say that. Like, if you don't say that, you're misrepresenting what China does. A majority of the production of all resources and materials, especially natural and common natural and organic, such as, let's just say mining, let's just say coal, let's just say oil, let's say silver, especially, let's say building electronics, like basically the fundamental parts of an economy in the modern world is done so by basically slave laborers who make 30, 20 cents like an hour. So if you're going to pull out all those statistics, I just feel, Jackson, I know you're never going to listen to this, maybe one day, but I feel that you need to also pull out that data and talk about their human rights abuse. Talk about millions of people being forced laborers, literally working when they don't want to work, working 15 hours a day. And if you read the rest of that article, the one I sent you in China, it's so bad that you won't want to read it. Like, I want you to read how bad it is, because you're talking about a place where people are being starved and they can't quit, because if they quit, they don't get paid. They have to sign a contract. And it says this in the article, I believe, too. Only one person out of the 500 workers reads English, and all the contracts are in English. They're giving English contracts to people who don't even speak English. And in that contract basically says, if you don't work when we want you to work, you won't get anything. And it's just so bad. And we have the nerve to complain about, our standards and our welfare of conditions in our workplace environment. It's like, we won. The laborers won. Whether you want to say the market won or the workers won, we won in the battle against bad labor conditions. And we won a long fucking time ago. It doesn't mean that everything's perfect. It just means you haven't seen kids working in coal mines since the early 20th century now, right? And in hard conditions, we've beaten this, and we've came so far. And we live in a country where a large portion of the population gets to not work and not die. That's a first world miracle. That's an American miracle. Do you know what happens if you don't work in China? For one, your social credit score goes way down, because one of the ways you build your social credit score in China is by working and working more, and especially working in tech-centered jobs, right? We have 10 million people who not only don't have jobs, not only are not producing anything as far as resources go for the consumers, but they're living in luxury. Like, that's a miracle. Do you understand how crazy that is? Without even unemployment. You have people who are simply going, they wake up every day and they work from their own computer, and they get to do so with a sense of liberty. And the idea that you have workers complaining about the unfair conditions of how I have to work for 9 hours straight. How ridiculous is that? It's like, I don't really get frustrated a lot of things the left does, because a lot of it I always see is backfiring on them, and I laugh. But that's one of the things that still, I know I shouldn't let it piss me off. But when I hear people complaining about the hard work hours in America, I say, look at China, where you don't get a choice. Either you work or you suffer the wrath of the tyrannical state. I'm sorry, I know that was long, but I had to get it all out.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's what the show's for. I'd rather have long answers than just short. Like, yep, yeah, China not good. Yeah, communism doesn't work. One statistic you might like to look at is the body count for the Great Leap Forward, which actually
50 million, roughly speaking.
And I think that's the largest in history. So
it is.
A lot of people are like, what happened in the Weimar Republic was bad. Yeah, definitely. But do you know what the Holodomor is? Do you know who Pol Pot is? Do you know Idi Amin? Oh, your college professor probably doesn't want to talk.
Yeah, he probably didn't tell you that more people were killed in 6 years than in both world wars under one tyrannical leader. Mao Zedong killed roughly, and you're welcome to look this up on Google. The stats are there for those who are willing to look. Roughly speaking, between 50 and 75 million people from 1958 to 1965. Yeah. That is an absurd amount of killing. In fact, what's crazy is there's statues of Mao everywhere.
And I don't get that. I don't get him being on statues. I don't get him
because he reset everything. I've talked to a literal Chinese, I would actually say propagandist, and I didn't know he was at first, but this guy from China who literally went on my show to brag about how good China is and basically say, this is why I should come. I really, truly think he was being paid by the state to come on my podcast and spread I'm not kidding you. It's a crazy podcast. Because one thing he talked about though and we had a decent conversation, but he talks about how everyone in China worships the majority of people in China worship Mao Zedong because they see him as the great sacrifice. That's why there's statues of him. That's why people worship his statues, because he was the great sacrifice. It was his doing of killing 50 to 70 million people that the reason why China is the way it is, and the reason why this generation of people can live in prosperity, although it's not true prosperity, it's prosperity with under certain conditions, right? Anyways, so they think of him as the great sacrifice, and now everyone in China can live this way because of Mao's great sacrifice. But it's just that's very irrational way of thinking. It's like this guy who's responsible for basically cutting out a generation, like forever, like non-existent. Multiple, like family trees were destroyed. You think Nazi Germany was bad? Try and go ahead and picture 50 million people in less than 10 years. Go ahead and try and picture that.
Yeah, I can't even do it like just, abstractly rather than concrete. And I find it kind of crazy people still revere him, probably because they don't know too much about him, just like Yeonmi Park says in North Korea. They don't know too
That's
much
part of it as well.
So they think, oh, well, he did all this stuff to help me when he was one of the worst out there. And don't get me wrong. People make excuses for fascists too, like Pinochet and Adolf and all that. And I'm not. I'm saying they're terrible. They're just as bad. Commies and fascists are terrible. But the problem is we're ignoring one side. We're like, these are the bad guys. Okay, yeah, they are. They are. I agree. Like Dr. Jordan B. Peterson would agree that these people did horrible things over here. But the people who just wanted equity, and the people that the sickle hammer should be just as bad as any other symbol that's removed. People should fear it just as much. People should think it's a bad idea just as much. Look at Venezuela. Look at North Korea. Look at China.
But what they'll keep saying is, I'll say to you, I'll pretend to be a very staunch sort of intellectual socialist or Leninist, Stalinist, and I'll say, well, the socialism that was implemented in the above examples that you stated was not actual socialism under the Marxist-Leninist doctrine. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't done to the full extent, and it was different in a lot of ways.
I'll say come back in 3-4 days when you haven't had anything to eat, and we'll debate this. Hey man, I'm almost to the halfway through the bread line, man. We're almost through the bread line.
Well, here's the thing with the bread line, and here's the thing with
Uh,
equity, which is really a Marxist coined term, not in the financial sense, but in the term that it's being used for now to replace equality with equity, to sort of to make self evident that the two are almost identical, and that there's a difference, that equity can be equal, or that there's equal equity for all, right? Because this is part of the postmodernist sort of thinking, is if you soften the language, if you manipulate words, and if you're a postmodernist, you're under the belief that there's nothing else existing other than socially constructed concepts. There is no objective a priori truth. Everything is socially constructed. So under that sort of doctrine and frame of thinking, nothing has an objective point, an objective foundation. So the meaning of words lose value, and then words simply become toys to play around with, to express your opinions and to propagate your ideas onto the world without caring about the consequences of those words. Because just because you're a postmodernist and you see the world through this constructivist view doesn't mean that those words still don't have consequences. It just means that you're blind to them. Yeah. So it's crazy when you think about it this way, because one thing I like to do is I like to think about, okay, this person who's like Mao, for instance, what was his frame of thinking, right? What was his frame of thinking? Some of those questions need to be asked. But even before that, here's one thing I'll ask to everyone out there who's went to college. Did you learn about everything we just spoken of? If you did not, don't you think that's a major issue with the education system? I never learned any of this. I never was taught, and this might be an individual case. As you said, correlation doesn't necessarily mean malice. Isn't that what you said?
Yeah, correlation isn't causation.
Yes, exact causation.
The teacher didn't bring up the Holodomor doesn't mean they're like, oh, I'm pro that.
Well, I didn't learn about any of that. I didn't learn about. All I remember is seeing Stalin, like his name, but I was never taught about socialism, the Holodomor. Definitely not Mao. Why was that the case? I feel like I'm not the only example here, but maybe I am. I don't know.
I highly, highly, highly doubt it. Because most people don't know. Most people don't know about that. Venezuela, what's going on in North Korea. Most people just don't know. Most people don't know Pol Pot. Most people don't know Idi Amin. You just have to, unfortunately, find these things and be like, wow, this is terrible. And I even will say, with the postmodernist thought, yeah, there's multiple different interpretations to one thing. I get it. But they have different interpretations, have different values, and give you different outcomes. Just like George Carlin says, when people are saying we're not handicapped, we're handy-capable. He's like, these poor people have been BS'd into saying that if you change the name of the condition, somehow it changes the condition. And it doesn't happen like that. Now, I can argue like, okay, fine, through meditation and different things and changing your belief system, you can change outcomes, but that's not how they're predicating things here. They're just saying change the language and use it to gain an upper hand on people. Everything is power. So that's how we're going to go. And I would just say to people who are postmodernists or trying to do this or trying to ignore reality is that, yeah, you can ignore reality. You can. But you can't avoid the consequences of ignoring reality. As Ayn Rand said, I love that quote. You can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. And that's just how it be. That's just how it is. I don't, like it or don't like it. That's how it is. So speaking of socialism and all that, so you sent me this Bloomberg article, even a labor shortage. You can't just go get a job. Finding a role that suits your skills and career path is harder than all those now hiring signs make it seem. And yeah, I see this all everywhere. I see Starbucks and Burger King, and they were up to 20 million active online jobs posting in August. There are jobs, but it's not easy for everybody to get a quality job. And I agree with that, but what Bloomberg probably doesn't say is Well, they're paying people to stay home, which is hurting the economy, because if people aren't making stuff, where is the value coming from? Value comes from having more services and products in the market. And B, they will never, ever, ever say, here's what quantitative easing is. Here's why, because of quantitative easing, you can't afford your rent, your mortgage, your this. So I think those are two things.
Real quick, okay, familiarize my audience, because they probably don't know what quantitative easing is, just in basic terms, however you want to describe it.
What I would describe it is you create currency out of thin air, but not necessarily like printer go burr, although I think that's been done in the past. But what you do is you inflate the money supply. So you go say, oh, okay, Senator X, your bank account balance is, just type in how many zeros you want to a reasonable extent. And then they do that. And then they keep doing that. Then all of a sudden, there's more dollars in circulation, but there's the same amount of products and services. So it's kind of a very sneaky thing. You're like, well, okay, I don't see how this is a tax. They didn't actually go and take anything from me. I'm not saying my bank balance is the same, but what's the big deal? But then you're like, oh, wait, those sneakers that were $20 are now $25. Okay. But then they're like 30. Then they're like 40. Then you start seeing like prices rise. Then it's very expensive for a lot of Americans to have Thanksgiving. And they're saying, why? And they're like, well, my employer needs to pay me more wages. And, you know, that's between you and your employer and your skill set. But what I would say is the big thing, the reason why this is happening is there's more money in circulation. There's the same amount of products and services, and it's not sound money because they can keep creating it out of thin air. So that's why it becomes more expensive for you to live, and that's how they're robbing you. And that's my quick I wouldn't call myself an Austrian economist, but I like Austrian thought. That's my quick thing. Like the minimum wage used to be $5.25. And people are like, I can't live on that. So yeah.
And what's crazy is one of the craziest articles I read was up in May, and who knows what this number is now, but it was like, I believe it was Bloomberg, it was Wall Street Journal. Over 40% of all of US dollars that were in existence were printed in the last 12 months. Like that is that, like that's not like no small feat right there. It's like what are the ramifications of that, and how many times have we done that in the past? I don't know of a time where we printed that much money.
No. I don't know us. I know Germany did after World War I, and that didn't get well. I think Venezuela did, and Zimbabwe, and are there any more countries that did it? I don't know. There probably is. There actually probably is. Someone can correct me in the chat, or if they watch this. There's other countries that have definitely done it, but the ramifications are exactly what you're seeing now. Like I told people, even the Trump supporters who agreed with me on a lot of freedom and economy stuff, he gives out these free money. I guarantee you guys will pay it back later. Prices will go up. And they're like, come on, Kareem, we just need to help Americans. They've been shut down. I'm like, this is not helping. It's going to help very, very temporarily. Kind of like if you have a substance abuse problem and I say, okay, here's another beer. Okay,
that's a good point. That's actually a good point, because if you think about it, okay. So remember, every time we're talking about COVID, we're not talking about COVID. Like as far as the implications of what happened were not due to COVID. People died. That was due to the virus. People got sick. People were in the hospitals. People were infected. But the economic struggle was entirely due to the reaction of COVID. So if we say just COVID, if we do what the media does, that, well, because of COVID, but no, it wasn't because of the virus. It was because of the way exaggerated reaction to the virus. So let me rephrase. Because of the reaction to the virus, we saw people suffer. And then amidst that suffering, the government said, let me give you a treat that will subdue your suffering today. But what they also did was they subdued your suffering for a day or two, a week or two. I'm being a little hyperbolic, but you get what I'm saying. Very temporarily, as you said. But in long term, you will suffer much more than you would before. So we're going to make you suffer double, even let's take inflation. We're going to make you suffer economically more than anyone has in 31 years as far as inflation is concerned. But right now, you'll have that $1,200 that will help you for a month at the most. And if you're really frugal, maybe a month and a half. Okay, so we'll subdue your suffering now, but we're causing you much more suffering in the long run. How much of that has been going on, Kareem, in the last 50 years? How much of these sort of, as you said, the famous Friedman quote, where it's like nothing's more permanent than a temporary government policy, right? So how much of this has been going on where we let our government we basically have fallen into a mass battered woman syndrome, and our whole country's in it. We're all been battered so much by our by our government, and we're like, okay, you're going to help us. But every time they keep abusing us, they keep punching us, they keep taking away our money's power, our currency's value. They keep deflating our money. They keep doing it, and we keep just saying, okay, all right, I guess this is what we need to do. I guess we're suffering from the virus. I guess is what we need to do. And then later on, okay, inflation sucks, but I guess it's only transitory. Okay, maybe it's not transitory, but I guess it will get better once people work. Okay, nobody's working. I guess people have to be incentivized to work. Okay, the median wage went up like by $4 in some states. Okay, now that the median wage has gone up, people want to work now because the labor force has been met with their demands of increased pay with higher wages. Oh, but because of higher wages and the inflation, that their higher wages are actually lower than they were before, and products are even more expensive than they were. Do you see what I'm saying? It's incrementalism to the highest degree, and it's almost like this. We're letting them abuse us, and we keep saying that it's necessary. We keep saying, well, you can't just get rid of the government. We got to have something. But it's like, when will it take for the mass amount of people in the country to realize our government is mainly malevolent? Mainly our federal government, speaking strictly federal. Let me remind people of something. The CIA agency, Central Intelligence Agency, was founded, and look this up for me because I forget. It was hold on, I think it's coming to me. Well, just look up what the CIA was before the CIA. There was a certain name for it. I cannot remember.
I mean, it was like Kermit.
I'm trying to remember.
What was his name? He was one like the president's cousin, and he tried something in Iran and got caught. And they're like, "We can't do this. We need a Central Intelligence Agency." But I know the president.
Okay, OSS. That's what it was. That's what I want. Okay, so the Central Intelligence Agency, Principal Foreign Intelligence and Counterintelligence Agency, which my uncle didn't serve in the CIA, but in the Counterintelligence Agency of the U.S. government, formally created in 1947, the Central Agency CIA grew out of the World War II Office of Strategic Services, or OSS. Right, the original reason why we had the OSS was to have a more advanced ability to decipher and proliferate information and intelligence on enemies, especially the non-allies in the Second World War. Out of that grew a whole new agency that was, again, permanent. That OSS was only supposed to be for the means of the war, to help with the war and getting at Hitler and getting in Soviet Union and gathering more information, because we needed a bigger agency for that, right? Because what we have is never enough now. We have to add more systems to which the government can not only seek but gather data among people, right? And then the CIA grew out of it, right? But the CIA, one of the craziest things about it is that people like to say, well, not everyone in the CIA is evil. And I say, no. But everyone in the CIA is highly capable of doing evil things and not saying a word about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's the hard part. It's like the same thing. Like, I'm not in an evil institution. And granted, hey, look, I get there's a lot of, like, hey, there's good people in the military. There's good people here. There's good people, I'd say every agency, everything. Even there's been good people at Pfizer. I've seen that thing. Like, I'll say that. But look, Yeah, the fact of the matter is, when you're called to do something highly malevolent, it's your orders. You don't really have like, well, I want to debate this. I just don't. I think this president they elected is good. I don't want to interfere. I don't think we should get involved. I don't think we should do this. I don't think we should anything. But that's not how it's going to work. So eventually, yeah, you're whether you like it or not, you're going to have to be forced to do something bad. You're going to have to be forced to do something evil. It's not just the U.S. government. Trust me, people make that mistake. It's all governments. We talked about the U.S. government. We talked about Austria. Now even Greece is, throwing down more restrictions. And they said on Monday they introduced new restrictions because they said Rona spiked, and a government order went into effect December 6th. They mandate masks at all workplaces, staggering opening hours in the private sector. They do allow adults to do like indoor recreation and stuff, but they've restricted spaces like bars, restaurants, movie theaters, all that. And they said that's because the ICU got crazy. And they say, well, it's because people didn't get this medical procedure. They're getting very sick and being admitted to the ICU. So he's saying that people who got it don't need the same level of protection, but actually you're locking all of them down. And a senior prosecutor is fighting back. He's filed criminal misdemeanor charges against more than 40 people in Greece involved in selling all these things. So I'm seeing that it's all it seems to be a global, like people say there is a global pandemic. I agree. And they're like, is it of Rona? And I'd say no. It's of central institutions. It's of organized monopolies on force in a given territorial region, which is basically how you define government, how wavered. That's all it is. When people get over the magic of, oh, this is a mystical thing. They did something with a flag. They had an inauguration. They did all these religious things. If you haven't seen Larkin Rose Government is a Religion, take a look at it, because it definitely is. Because the mafia doesn't do like, look at us. We take pictures next to the and we revere the office and we swear on the Bible. I'm pretty sure being in a position to use coercion against your citizens probably goes against commandments in the Bible. I don't know. I'm not a biblical scholar, but I will say that if you get over the magic of what a government is and just see it as another corporation that provides bad services because they have no incentive to, then it makes things a whole lot more clearer, in my opinion. And last but not least, did want to keep going over one thing in Europe. This is pretty new. November 22, Russia keeps sounding the alarm over Nato because for some reason, like speaking of old institutions, NATO was supposed to be a defense against the USSR. There's no more USSR. There's a Shanghai Cooperation Organization. I get that in the OIC, but this is going too far. So the Kremlin said, claims that Moscow they're not, I don't think they're getting ready to invade Ukraine. But what I think the problem is, NATO keeps saying, hey, Ukraine, you can join up. And then they keep giving Ukraine high-tech weapons. And they're giving a lot of high-tech weapons in Kyiv. And what the Kremlin spokesperson said, Dmitry Peskov, on Monday, these two people these two countries are having tensions, and they're both accusing people of mobilizing military units. And it says Kyiv itself is building up its forces, and they're being helped to build up its forces, and they're being supplied with a significant amount of weapons, including modern high-tech weapons. I can probably guess where they're coming from. And the number of provocations is growing and growing significantly. What's more, these provocations are being carried out with weapons being supplied by NATO countries. He said, we didn't learn our lesson in Syria, apparently. Citing the United States headed transatlantic security alliance. And we are observing this with great alarm. And they're saying for its part, Kiev fears Moscow might be preparing an attack, and U.S. NATO officials have been making several statements for 2 weeks, referring to what they say are unusual Russian troop movements in the border region. Last but not least, the head of the Ukraine military intelligence told Military Times outlet this weekend Russia had more than 92,000 soldiers amassed around the Ukraine border and is preparing for an attack. Here's the thing. And this is a pretty long article, so I'm just going to break this down. I don't think NATO should be involved in this at all. I don't think NATO should exist. I don't think the Ukraine should be in NATO. I don't like this idea of even collective defense like this. I don't mind like agreements between states. I don't mind agreements between like, okay, the UK and Ireland or you know, parts of like these regions say, okay, if something happens, we'll work with you. I'm not necessarily against like localized, you know, contracts of like, okay, well, I'll help, you know, Pennsylvania will help, Oregon and New York will help this if this happens or this goes down. But I don't like NATO because of the collective responsibility. It's an old institution that was created around the to fight in the Cold War, if you want to say that, or to exist in the Cold War, to be as a deterrent for the USSR. However, I think it should be gone. We should get out of it. I do see it's a problem that we're now supplying Ukraine weapons, because I could see this becoming like a Syria type situation, which in my opinion, it's getting there. And I see a lot of provocations that we shouldn't be doing. So I kind of want to get off the Rona stuff and also take a look at this, because I am following kind of what NATO does, because a long time ago I kind of decided, let me query it on YouTube. And I found a lot of things saying NATO keeps the peace, NATO keeps this, NATO's saving the world. I'm like, you blew Libya back to the Stone Age. You put Libya back to the Stone Age. There's actual slavery there, not figurative slavery like, yes, I'm paying taxes on inflated money, which is terrible, but there's actual slavery in Libya. They destroyed Libya. The things that go. So I'm like, no, stop saying NATO's this big savior and start seeing it for what it is, just a transatlantic, in my opinion, terrorist organization. That's my spiel on it.
Yeah, I'll say, just on that note, is that be aware of those who claim absolutes, especially absolutes when it comes to government, right? Or agencies. And what is NATO? Would you consider it a global organization / entity that involves itself with with the endeavors of multiple nations in multiple countries, and maybe it does seek for peace, but maybe with seeking for peace also comes destruction, because one of the best ways to paint a nation and leave it with a stroke of pure peace, or to bless a nation with pure peace, is to wipe out its species, right? So, like, what is peace? What is it? Is it in the sense that nobody gets hurt ever? Well, that's not peace. That's utopia.
Yeah.
So those who claim to seek to make the world more peaceful, maybe look into them and see whether that's what they're doing or not, because sometimes the pacifist who walked into a room full of murderers, right? Think about this scenarios, right? You have this pacifist who walks in a room. You got multiple killers. You got one who was, I don't like where, I'll say killers. I like that better. You know, one was in the military, right? One was in the Navy. One was in the SEALs. One had actually just killed someone. They were trying to, let's say, Kyle Rittenhouse type incident. Had to defend himself, had to kill someone. Now, all these people have different personalities and different types. And the pacifist comes in and sees a few of these people getting into disagreements, and then even sees two of them fighting. And they're fighting, they're hurting each other. There's no weapons involved, and they're just fighting out like men do sometimes. This pacifist walks up to them and tries to break it up. And while doing that, he hadn't realized he triggered PTSD in one of the ex-soldiers. And then his life, he ended up killing the dude who was trying to break up the fight, and which then ends in violence. So it's like, it's not necessarily necessary to break up conflict, because sometimes conflict is necessary, as I guess what I'm saying. And if countries want to have conflict in their own sovereign states, who are we to go over there and arm one side or not arm another, or to take sides in their war? It's like, if they want to war it out, maybe let them. Like, historically, it's tended to work. It's like, yes, you get to a point in a country where there's a massive amounts of division, massive amounts of violence, and then they fight a civil war. And it's like, sometimes that civil war lasts a while. Sometimes it's not that long, but it tends towards, after a civil war, there tends to be not necessarily a place of peace, but a place of calmness. It's like, sometimes you need to resolve conflicts, and sometimes human nature calls for large-scale conflicts or civil wars. So I'm just saying, I just don't think we should be in other countries. Like, even in World War II, I think there's some questions that should be asked as to whether we could just go up in different countries all over the world under the name of fascism. But it's weird how we didn't do that under the name of socialism. Like, this is my biggest problem with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. They always say, oh, but if it's something like, we haven't had a real war since World War II, it's like, then it was different. It was justified. Okay, but if we're going to pick and choose here, if our government wants to, raid 7 third world countries, if they want to go into Afghanistan, if they want to go into Libya, if they want to go into Syria, if they want to go into Iraq, if they want to go into all these different countries, Sudan, Somalia, well, why are they going there when you have a country by the name of North Korea, who is literally I think it's over 55% of their population suffers from malnourishment, and over 60% of all deaths are related to lack of food related deaths. You have a portion of the population who's being tortured all the time. There's open concentration camps there where you get sent, and you have to worship your leader or you die. They'll cut your head off. And so, and he uses, Kim Jong-un, who's really truly evil and malevolent, uses a majority of his workforce, the people who are actually able to sustain work because they eat, because the state provides for them. And this is really what exploitation looks like. A majority of his workforce is used to build his military weapons. How do you think people build that? It's because all the people it takes to build that's all they're doing all the time. And because they're doing that all the time, which happens to be the need or the want or the demand of the state, then they get fed for it. And even they aren't even close to Americans. And Malice documents this well in his great book called Dear Reader. Read that fucking book. It is great. It's a great eye-opening book. It opened my eyes way before Yeonmi Park opened my eyes. It was the first book where I really truly understood like the depths to which North Korea goes and its evilness. But it's like, why aren't we invading North Korea? Oh, that's right, because China's right around the corner, right? Is maybe that's the reason? But I just don't think we can go doing this. Oh, well, there's bad stuff going on. Why aren't we in North Korea? Why aren't we in China? Why? Why aren't, if there was a country at the top of the list of tyrannical states, North Korea is at the top, right? Am I pretty close in saying that? Pretty at the very peak of.
And I'll even go further and say, hey, look at what Saudi Arabia is doing
with women. They can't even have their identity there.
I'm pretty sure, actually, my aunt told me if you don't pray in Saudi Arabia and you're Muslim, there are groups that will come out and assault you. There's public, executions.
Yes.
On top of that, there's Yemen. On top of all of that, they antagonize, I would say, neighboring countries by funding a lot of these crazy, like Al-Nusra and stuff. Where do they get that ideology? Like, you just don't wake up one day and go, hey, I'm a hobbyist. There's nothing on Netflix. You get that from, in my opinion, the clergy in Saudi Arabia promulgates that out. And these people went to Syria and caused problems. And the people who, like every, in my opinion, really crazy person you're seeing coming out of the Middle East, probably you can trace back to some Saudi Arabian person teaching, whatever it is. Maybe not every, but a lot. But we're their buddy. We give them money. We help them out. We give them intelligence. Not only like, okay, you can say, okay, we're not really supporting China militarily or anything like that. Saudi Arabia is the most, in my opinion, if you look outside of communism, they're one of the most backwards regimes, but they still have monarchy, but we like them.
Yes, here's the thing that I think is this is one of my biggest critiques of the feminist movement. Is it's like, okay, if you wanna protest for women's rights, that's absolutely fine. But why the hell are you doing it in the country which grants women the most rights anywhere? It doesn't make any sense from a logical standpoint. Okay, you want to be for women's rights. Why are you not in Saudi Arabia every day? For instance, I'm going to give you a list of things that they can't do in Saudi Arabia. They can't marry. They can't own a driver's license.
They can't protest.
They're not allowed to protest. They can't swim. They cannot wear hats. They cannot take off their shirts. They have to wear a set of clothes every day. Again, I don't know if it says open bank account. They're not allowed to get a fair trial. They're not allowed to travel across borders. They're not allowed to dress how they want. They're not allowed to interact with men, or they could be executed. I mean, they're not allowed to seek important medical treatment. They're not even allowed to have legal custody of their children. They're not allowed to have equal inheritance, which means there's a sister and a brother. The brother gets all the inheritance of the mother and the father, or really the father, because that's the only. You're not even guaranteed an ID. You're not even certified as a living human cognitive being if you're a woman in Saudi Arabia. Do you understand the pure hypocrisy of these feminists to say that they're protesting for women's rights, to say that they care about women and they want equal rights, to then be in America at the White House? What the hell are you doing there? Do you understand how many rights this place is granted, no matter how corrupt, no matter how much the bureaucracy continues, no matter all of the things we just talked about in the previous thing? One thing we've been pretty good on is getting over the bad shit we've done that were very bad. And we've granted women rights. And then they like to point to the wage gap. Let's just say the wage gap, the wage gap within women to man to female. Let's just say that's completely because of inequality, which it's not. And I've talked about this on my show multiple times as to why it's not. But let's just say it is. It's completely due to the patriarchy that is America. Well, even if you want to consider what we're living in, a patriarchy, and a tyrannical one at that, then you have to say, well, this probably happens to be the best patriarchy because women dominate colleges, universities. They dominate pretty much all hospitality field. Go ahead and pick a field of hospitality. They dominate that. They dominate pretty much almost all sectors of medicine and of medical organizations. They dominate a lot of industries. One of the only industries they don't dominate is the STEM field, right? And the same thing in school, but they dominate everything else. Women graduate at higher rates than men. Women get jobs at higher rates than men. Now there's the wage gap. So women are doing very good, and the numbers show that. In fact, they're doing much better than men in a lot, especially boys, in a lot of categories, especially when it comes to university and graduation rates, right? So even if it is a patriarchy, and even if there is this wage gap because it's very tyrannical, you still can marry. You still have your name. You have an ID card that says your name is Elizabeth. That's 10 times more. That just being able to swim is 10 times more than what they have in Saudi Arabia. Being able to wear a damn tank top, like we're talking about basic human rights, which women in Saudi Arabia are not granted. Why are you not there protesting it every day? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Or, okay, and they say, like, no, Saudi Arabia, okay, protest the Taliban then. The only reason I know they won't is, one, it's comfortable here to say mansplaining or this, or one guy was mean, or one guy had called or something, or one guy did something. And granted, I get it. There's creepy dudes out there. Trust me, there's weird dudes. There's dudes that, you know, like, I don't think you should follow anyone around or be like staring at people in weird ways. But look, if you compare that to, well, in Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan, I want to drive. It's like, no. How about an education? No. How about going outside without covering? No. How about I don't want to follow this religion? No. How about I'm used for anything other than a second-class citizen? No. Just no. So I kind of question.
You're not even a second-class citizen. Sorry to interrupt, but you're not even a second-class citizen. You're not a citizen at all. You're deemed as property in Saudi Arabia, and I'm not joking. I'm not being hyperbolic. You are property to a male. You are his property legally.
yeah, so I question if the United States is saying this is bad, let's go get this here. We want to help Ukraine. Here, NATO's giving you weapons. We want to help this. Gaddafi's bad dude. We want to help I'm using help hyperbolically, but we want to help in Iraq because Saddam's an evil dude, and we want to be in Somalia. I know why they're in Somalia though. They're jealous because Somalia had a better government than we did post 1991. Just kidding. Not really, kind of. But if we want to be in all these countries, we want to be in NATO and all these globalist institutions get involved everywhere. Well, why does it just so happen to be that we're always finding people who want to drop our dollar, want to not do business with us or do any of that? So it's something to ponder on. Also, people need to start, getting up and like in Austria, really, really opposing this thing and get the information out there. Because if we get the information out there, in my opinion, we can win this information war. So it's just that simple. And also, you need good people to help you do it. So check us out at the lpmisescaucus.com. No more wars, lockdowns, bailouts, or mandates. Put your name, last name, email address, phone number, and state, and become a delegate. And if you'd like to find Daniel's work, which we've done some podcasts together, he's also done some really, really good work.
Keep it on that screen because I want to plug the anchor thing real quick.
Okay.
Scroll all the way up to the top. So up there for everybody watching and looking at Kareem's screen, in that top corner of my page, if you go on my page, you click that link that says the support page where he just was, and then you hit subscribe right there. You pay a small monthly fee of $8.99, and we're going to be doing, maybe not this today, but we're going to start doing subscriber-only episodes where we get really deep into some conspiracies and maybe just take things as self-evident that are absolutely ludicrous. Maybe talk about vaccines and go haywire. Have a little bit of comedy, because some comedy is, it gets banned off YouTube. And I really, one day, I don't know how close it will be in the near future, but I would really love to do this full time. And I would even like to do more journalism type things. I would like to hire people to cover stories. I have a whole plan set up, but it does require money. I also have a plan to get a studio. I'm working on that now. Right. But all the money that you give me, it's going to be used for a couple things. It's going to be used for me to get better equipment, better camera, a better microphone, maybe even more microphones to have in-person guests, traveling expenses, because eventually I want to come, maybe have an in-person studio event with Kareem and maybe someone else. And I'll be able to go across the country and do live or recorded episodes with people. I'll be able to get bigger guests with more influence. So all the money you're going to be donating is going to really be going back into you, because you're going to reap the rewards of everything I put in, because it's all going to go into podcasting. It's all going to go into YouTube. It's all going to go into my subscriber channel. And it really does help. If you really like anything that I do, if you like my perspective, maybe you don't like my perspective, but you like that I try and be honest. I try and be objective. I'm not always perfect, but I really try my hardest to cover things non-emotionally. And I'm very clear when I am being emotional about something. I have my biases just like anyone. And, I don't hate the left. I don't hate the right. I just seek calling out both sides, which me and Kareem do a lot. Like the famous quote, the right is the progressives driving the speed limit, I believe it is. And that is so true. There absolutely are. And I'd like to keep doing this. If you do like my content, please subscribe. It really means a lot. And thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. That's it for me.
Yeah. And definitely, guys, go ahead. Go to Daniel B on YouTube. And he has big dreams, just like Tim Pool. So if you want to see more like Tim Pool's or good podcasts out there that are objective, that do get to the heart of the matter, and that are about creating a free world, check him out on YouTube. All right, everyone. This is Kareem, your host with the Essential Libertarians, giving you the tools for self-governance. I'll see you in the next episode.
Good night.